Hello, good evening, and welcome back. Moving on from Matt Hancock's crocodile tears, we've got doctors must watch COVID vaccine patients for 15 minutes after the jab to check for side effects after two NHS workers had severe allergic reactions. UK regulator says in policy that could slow down mass vaccination plans. Well, you don't say, because of course historically, or previously, it was supposed to just be a 2-minute thing. You come in, you get your jab, you're feeling okay, brilliant, off you go. So, okay, fine, maybe you shouldn't drive for the next 15 minutes just in case, but okay, you'll be fine. Now it's, well, we're going to have to monitor you for the next 15 minutes, and we have to make sure that there is ventilator equipment where it is happening, which means it is not going to be administered by your local GP, but instead it's going to have to take place at a hospital. You've got to have EpiPens and adrenaline to hand as well, just in case there's an anaphylactoid or an anaphylaxis shock from an allergic reaction that goes into it, which they say is ordinary for regular vaccines because they're normally grown in eggs, and therefore if somebody is allergic to eggs, they could still get an allergic reaction because some egg protein will find its way into the vaccine, but shouldn't be the case for this one. So then why is there an allergic reaction? They don't know. They can't really say. Except of course, that the rate at which people are getting an allergic reaction is so minuscule that it's basically just random. It's that you would expect this anyway, so it's nothing to be worried about. This definitely isn't symptomatic of a longer term problem which we'll see come to light later on. Definitely not. This is just, kind of what you'd expect when there's a foreign substance being injected into somebody's body. Even with the safest things, as this has passed the stringest, best, most incredible safety restrictions, and therefore it's definitely safe for human consumption, that there is no doubt at all that any side effects or allergic reactions or that kind of thing is just par for the course. There's no real problem. Sure, of course, people with such an allergic reaction could die if they don't have the treatment in those few minutes when they need it, but hey, even then, it's not very deadly because it would only be as deadly as actually getting the coof in the first place. So it's not really a problem. Hang on a minute. That's a fun thought, isn't it? That not only do we know that the coof isn't as deadly as hippopotamus is, and it isn't, as in coming into contact with hippos is more deadly than coming into contact with the CCP virus. But they're now using that standard as saying the side effects are negligible, the risks are not really a problem, so you're going to be fine. Hang on a minute. If that's your standard, why the fuck have we locked everybody down? And then, of course, you got Matt Hancock fighting back the tears as he goes, oh, just what a monumentous occasion this is, and still trying to reference V-Day. It's like, no, we already have a V-Day. Sure, VE Day is in Victory in Europe Day, but I will not be referring to the first vaccination for the coof as V-Day. You're making it sound like something important. You're trying to play the language games of the left, and I am not going to let you get away with it. If you want a V-Day, then I'm going to take that V as the Roman numeral, as in 5. In which case, the 5th, we already have a day for that. It's the 5th of November. And it's very telling, of course, that using the V, considering how close this runs to V for Vendetta, that the parallels are a little bit too close for comfort. And from the film adaptation, the graphic novel, that took 10 years in the planning for his London Underground Railway to then be built again and then lead to the Houses of Parliament. He said it took 10 years in the making. But nonetheless, I wouldn't be surprised if people have already started planning, and I don't just mean stocking up for like a doomsday scenario, as we've seen the preppers from before for any eventuality, and in this kind of instance, then obviously they were correct to do so. Not because there's a cataclysmic event that stops people from being able to eat and drink, but instead because government. And that really is the case, to draw a broader point, that they say, like some of the biggest threats facing mankind are climate change or nuclear warfare or an asteroid hit. So no, I think the biggest threat facing mankind is communism. It really is, because that is the kind of insidious ideology that can take over a population and kill millions of the productive workforce within just a matter of years. And we seem to, I'm holding my breath in trepidation of this happening, but we seem to be teetering on the edge of it going down that route. So I would say that's the biggest threat to mankind, at least at present. So they go on to say, Britain's medical watchdog issued new 15-minute advice to vaccination centres and doctors' surgeries today. It's significant because regulatory problems in storing and distributing Pfizer's jab means time is of essence, and each vaccination site is expected to deploy 975 doses of the vaccine within 3.5 days. Yeah, so because of its shelf life of like 6 hours, essentially, and that, you can't just get some out and leave the others in the fridge, for whatever reason, that it's going to be even more difficult because everybody has to be socially distanced as well. Of course, apparently. But it does gain credence to that meme that, hey, if I don't want a vaccine, then I'll just refuse to wear a mask because then they won't let me in the vaccination centre. So, interesting. So people who can't wear a mask are those that, of course, by law, are exempt because of like respiratory problems, and it would be too much of a risk for them to restrict their airways in the first place. But of course, then they're also more at risk in the higher risk group for COVID. So they're also the first ones to get the vaccine. But then you have to wear a mask and socially distance at the centre. But if you have to socially distance, then how long are we saying the vaccine takes to take hold? So, okay, a few days. Okay, right. But then it's 21 days later, you have another shot, kind of a top-up, a booster, if you will, like we do see with other vaccinations, like tetanus, for example. So, right. So, do we need any more later on? You're not saying. That's rather telling. Okay. But then, when are we immune? And if, surely, the coof is so rife around, then you wouldn't actually need a booster shot because you would come into contact with somebody before then. And how many of these people that are getting vaccinations are also being tested for antibodies in the first place, for them to then say, actually, you've already got antibodies, we didn't have any vaccines, you've already had it. Cool. You didn't know, you were asymptomatic. God. Fucking hell. Okay, let's add that to the case totals, and then just ignore the fact that they're asymptomatic. Let's just do that. Is that what they're doing? I'm quite sure that's quite possible. That's what could be done here, because if they're already injecting somebody with something, it stands to reason that they could easily extract something as well. It wouldn't be too difficult and quite simple as well. It's like, you're coming in today for your COVID vaccine? Brilliant, we're going to have to do a blood test to make sure you haven't got any allergies or anything like that. It's like, oh my God, this person's got the antibodies. Put it in the case report. It's like, hey, but aren't you concerned that by having such an increase in cases and no change in deaths that people are going to realise this is overblown? No, because we control the narrative. And by the time people realise that this is all a farce, it'll be far too late. Right. But, of course, they're saying, for whatever bloody reason that they've picked, within 28 days of getting the coof, if you die within that time period of testing positive for the coof, then you're put down as a COVID death. 28 days. Right. So if you've got it, it's going to be a problem for 28 days. Okay. So how long's the quarantine? 14 days. Right. So why 28 days if you got positive? Because then that seems to be suggesting, you tested positive 14 days before you had it? Or you're just plucking this out your ass? Right, okay. And if you test negative, you've got to quarantine for 5 days. Like if you're coming from abroad. You take a test, you're negative, 5 days. Right. Why is that? So, because, you can get false negatives from these tests. Like you can false positives. Yeah, we don't talk about them. You're just going to quarantine for 14 days. What if I get a negative test after that? You've got a positive one. You're going to quarantine for 14 days. So, right, okay. So if I get a negative one, I've still got to quarantine for 5 days. Yeah. And how long does it take to get symptoms? Like, could it be dormant for? So, a week or two. So, right. And how long could I be harbouring for? 28 days. Okay, the longest we've known is 29. So, okay, right. So you're presuming then it's a false negative? Yes, we are. So in that case, I should still quarantine for 28 days. No. It would be 14 at most. Why 14? That sounds reasonable. Fewer people will object. Is this anything for safety? No, of course not. It's just to get people to comply to our ever-increasing demands. It's foot in the door theory. Okay, so then 5 days for a negative result. What's going to happen in those 5 days? It's like, well, if you actually develop symptoms, you get tested again and you're instituted for another 14 days. Okay, right. So if I take longer than 5 days to develop symptoms, then you're going to go out and spread it to other people and then get tested. Right, and if I don't want to get tested because I'm going to lose income and infringe on my family and friends because they're then going to be at risk and have to quarantine as well, well, that would be illegal, but we can't actually force you to get tested. Yeah, fair enough. There's nothing we can do. Right. So again, what's the point in this quarantine at all? 5 days at first, if you were, then 5 days for a negative? Because it seems to be that you're suggesting that the negative results are unreliable. So what exactly is the point here? Are you just plucking it out of your arse saying, well, 5 days sounds reasonable? How? So what, you're missing 1 work week instead of 2? Where's the logic to this? But of course there isn't any. But yes, as they say, it's significant because regulatory problems in storing and distributing Pfizer's jab mean time is of the essence. Yeah, and they even get into figures here of saying that compared to 2 minutes to 15 minutes of how many man-hours it's going to take. So, if the NHS was to spend 2 minutes administering every COVID-19 vaccine, it would take about 33,000 man-hours to vaccinate 1 million Brits. By comparison, it would now take 250,000 man-hours with a new quarter-hour rule. And the bigger problem is actually just having the space for this many people. Unless, of course, you then do like we did for supermarkets during the initial lockdown, of having those lines drawn in the car parks to say, well, yeah, you've got to keep your distance here. So then, in a way, they would have a queue to leave to say, okay, cool, you're in this car park, you're all outside, gotta love winter, and let's hope there's some sunshine because that'll be good for you. Here's your 6 foot distance rule. When we let you get to the end of the queue, your 15 minutes is up, in which case you're allowed to go. That seems to be the easiest way to do things. If there's a problem while you're in the queue, let us know. We'll take you back inside. But at least then, we're making use of the car park, and hopefully there is enough space there. And then you'll have one person looking over the, couple of hundred of people in the car park. If anybody is feeling a bit poorly, stick their hand up, make a shout, speak to someone, speak out, make themselves known, whatever it might be. Say, oh, I'm not feeling too well. Cool. Let's send you inside. Pass over to somebody else, and then we'll look over the rest of the people outside. So, if they wanted to make it simple, that's what they do. That is quite a simple solution. Very similar to what we did at the height of lockdown, at the peak. Of course, it's a bit different now that it's winter, but if people know that going into it, then essentially just say, you're going to have to wrap up warm. Maybe, if you want, then come with somebody else, get them to drive you here, and we're going to have different queues if you're walking or if you're driving, because if you're at a higher risk and you got worried about being cold because you're elderly, chances are you haven't made your own way there, but somebody else has taken you, in which case, by all means, get in the vehicle and then get in the queue, and you'll leave after the 15 minutes has elapsed. Again, if there's a problem, let us know, drive to another lane, whatever it might be, and you will be seen to. I would say it's that simple. And it isn't as if everybody going there is going to get vaccinated anyway, because it's high-risk groups first. So if you're an elderly person that gets your adult child, to drive you and drive you back, they're not going to be able to get vaccinated at the same time anyway. So that's pretty straightforward. But, hey, who would have thought the government intervention hadn't seen that there could possibly be unforeseen circumstances, that they hadn't planned for every eventuality, and yet, of course, they are supposed to be the benevolent dictator at the moment, because it is dictatorship. I have signed numerous petitions over the years to the government to say, I don't really agree with this. How about we make a change? And every single time it's got to 100,000 signatures, it's gone through to be debated, and they come back saying, no, we're not gonna follow this. It's like, right, how many signatures do you need? Or what's the bloody point in doing this if you're going to push ahead with your own agenda anyway? What's the fucking point? My only hope is that with the next election, things are going to be so incredibly bloody fractured that, as I've said before, you're going to have Labour, you're going to have Momentum, you're going to have Lib Dems, you're going to have Greens, you're going to have Conservatives, you're going to have Reclaim, and you're going to have Reform. And they're going to split the vote so bloody much that the ruling elite, the shadow government, whoever it might be, and I don't mean that as an official term, but the unofficial term of deep state, if you will, are going to think, well, shit, we need to provide a face at least to a majority ruling party, something that's reasonable in the middle of the road, in order to get enough votes in order to continue this shit show along. And I also maintain that their thoughts of radio and then television and now internet being so widespread, which means that information can be distributed so readily that they have to bring in censorship because there are things that they do not want to be heard, and they understand the Barbra Streisand effect of trying to silence something then draws more attention to it, and therefore they're saying, well, then let's just cut it out in the first place and do it so broad and sweeping that the populace will not understand what we're trying to censor in the first place. That's my take on it. So I know I got a bit off the beaten track of vaccines in particular, but it really is emblematic of a wider problem that we're facing. So if they continue to call it V-Day for vaccine, I'm going to call it Vendetta Day. So just to wrap up, to prove a point, the UK Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, MHRA, updated its guidance today after 2 NHS workers given the jab on Vendetta Day suffered an anaphylactic reaction. And that's it. So let me know what you guys think down below on all of this. If you think, the safest, strictest, most stringent health tests, you say, before it was put into widespread use. Your tests aren't very effective. I can't really trust any other tests. What are the long-term effects? Oh, we don't know, and yet it's still passed. What's your intention? And of course, this is going to get, shadow banned as it always does, and delegged as they always do. So if you do want to help out the channel, the best thing you can do is share this around to other people that you think might benefit from it, learn something from it, find something of value from it. But otherwise, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, as always, have a good one.